Most people stretch their hamstrings because the muscles truly do feel tight. Stretching may help for a few minutes or even a few hours, but the moment you go back to your normal routine, the tightness returns. If stretching and self-myofascial release are not improving your hamstring tightness, the reason is not in the hamstrings themselves. The tightness is a compensation for a breakdown happening somewhere else in the body. Today I'm explaining why your hamstrings always feel tight and the corrective approach that actually fixes the issue. Across my career working with elite athletes, professional golfers, MLB players, and general population clients, tight hamstrings are one of the most common complaints I see. The interesting part is that the people who stretch their hamstrings the most often have the tightest hamstrings. I've worked with athletes who felt constant hamstring tightness because their pelvis was tipped forward and lengthening the hamstrings all day long. I've worked with adults who felt tight because their glutes never activated and the hamstrings were doing every job. I've seen people who foam rolled daily but never improved because the nervous system was protecting them from instability. Once we fixed the underlying dysfunction, the hamstrings finally relaxed. Hamstrings feel tight for mainly three main reasons, and none involve the muscles actually being short. First, anterior pelvic tilt. When the pelvis tips forward, the hamstrings are held in a lengthened position. The brain senses this and increases tension to protect the system. You feel this as tightness even though the muscles do not need stretching. Second, poor lumbopelvic control. When the core cannot stabilize the pelvis, the hamstrings tighten to create stability. Muscles that are trying to stabilize cannot relax. Third, poor glute function and limited hip mobility. When the glutes are weak or the hips do not move correctly, the hamstrings take over multiple roles. They fatigue, overwork, and tighten as a protective strategy. This is why stretching alone does not solve the problem. You must fix the pelvis, the core, and the hips. The first major limitation is anterior pelvic tilt. This position lengthens the hamstrings and makes them feel tighter even though they are already stretched. The second limitation is poor core stability. When the midsection cannot control the pelvis, the hamstrings step in to stabilize. The third limitation is weak glutes. When the glutes cannot contribute hip extension, the hamstrings take over and tighten as they fatigue. Another limitation is limited hip mobility. If the hips cannot rotate or flex correctly, the hamstrings tighten to stabilize the system. Finally, poor breathing mechanics can alter rib and pelvic alignment, increasing tension down the posterior chain. Fixing tight hamstrings requires improving the pelvis, the core, and the hips rather than just stretching the hamstrings repeatedly. Step 1 is improving pelvic control. Dead bug variations, 90-90 breathing drills, and low-level core exercises teach the pelvis to stay neutral. When pelvic control improves, hamstring tension decreases. Step 2 is activating and strengthening the glutes so the hamstrings stop overworking. Glute bridge variations, hip thrusts, single leg hinges, and split squats shift the workload to the glutes. Step 3 is restoring hip mobility. Controlled internal and external rotation drills, 90-90 transitions, and lateral hip mobility work allow the hips to move without forcing the hamstrings to stabilize. Step 4 is improving core stability and trunk control. Plank variations, anti-rotation work, and trunk stiffness training help stabilize the pelvis during movement. Step 5 is retraining fundamental movement patterns. Learning to hinge at the hips, squat with control, and rotate through the thoracic spine instead of the lower back allows the hamstrings to function normally. This is how you fix hamstring tightness for good. When pelvic control improves, when glutes strengthen, and when the hips move correctly, the hamstrings stopped acting as a stabilizer. Flexibility improves naturally, strength training becomes safer and more productive, movement becomes easier, and long-standing tightness fades because the body no longer needs constant tension to create stability. Your hamstrings feel tight because they are protecting you from instability. If stretching does not solve the problem, improving pelvic control, strengthening the glutes, restoring hip mobility, and retraining fundamental movements does. Fix the dysfunction and the tightness will go away.